You know that specific sound blood makes when it rushes to your ears? That low, thrumming whoosh that drowns out the hum of the refrigerator, the distant chirping of birds, and the soft whir of the ceiling fan. That was the only thing I could hear as I stared at the grainy 1080p footage on my iPad. I wasn't breathing. I think I had actually stopped breathing about 45 seconds ago, right around the time the motion notification had pinged my phone. I rewound the video. I needed to see it again. I needed to be sure I wasn't having a stroke or a hallucination induced by paint fumes from the garage. On the screen, the timestamp read 10:14 a.m. My front porch was bathed in the crisp, golden light of a Tuesday morning. The delivery driver, a guy I knew by name, Steve, good guy, always hid packages behind the planter, had dropped off a small, heavy cardboard box. He took the photo, knocked once, and walked back to his truck. Standard procedure. 10:17 a.m. That was the kill time. From the left side of the frame, she waddled into view. Mrs. Gable, Linda, the president of the Homeowners Association, the self-appointed guardian of neighborhood morality, and a woman who once measured my grass with a plastic ruler she kept in her fanny pack. She was wearing her signature gardening ensemble, a floral print blouse that looked like it had been upholstered onto her, beige capri pants, and a sun visor that was fighting a losing battle against a perm from 1998. She didn't hesitate. She didn't pause to look around. She walked straight up my driveway, her gait determined, like a soldier marching into enemy territory. She stepped onto my porch, my private property, and looked down at the box. On the video, I watched her lip curl. It was a visible sneer. She nudged the box with the toe of her orthopedic sneaker. Then, she bent down. "No," I whispered to the empty room. "Don't you do it, Linda." She picked it up. She shook it. And then, with the casual indifference of someone tossing a wrapper, she turned around, walked down my driveway to the curb where our trash bins were lined up for collection, and dropped the box into her bin. Her bin. Not my bin. Hers. And then, this was the part that made my vision swim with red spots. She dusted her hands off, satisfied, and waddled back to her house to prune her hydrangeas. I looked at the clock on the wall. 10:25 a.m. A low rumble shook the window frame. A heavy hydraulic whine. The sound of air brakes hissing. The garbage truck. I didn't think. I didn't put on shoes. I was wearing socks and a t-shirt that said, "I'm here because you broke something," and I exploded out of my front door like I'd been shot out of a cannon. "Stop!" I screamed, tearing across the lawn. "Stop the truck!" I was too late. I watched, in slow motion, as the mechanical arm of the waste management truck lifted Mrs. Gable's green bin into the air. It inverted. A cascade of garbage bags, loose debris, and one small, heavy cardboard box tumbled into the hopper. "No!" I yelled, reaching the curb just as the compactor blade came down. Crunch. The sound was sickening. It wasn't a wet crunch like food waste. It was the sharp, metallic snap of precision-machined aluminum being ground against steel. The driver, a guy in a neon vest and sunglasses, looked down at me from the high cab. He looked bored. "Little late, buddy. Bin was out." "My package!" I gasped, pointing at the truck. "My neighbor! She threw my package in there! You have to stop the compactor!" He shook his head, shifting gears. "Can't do it. Once it's in the hopper and the blade cycles, it's gone. Liability. Can't let you dig in there, and I can't dump the load until I hit the station. Sorry, pal." He revved the engine, a belch of diesel smoke hitting me in the face, and rumbled off down the street toward the cul-de-sac. I stood there in my socks. The asphalt was warm. My socks were wet from the morning dew on the grass. I looked at the empty bin. I looked at the spot where the truck had been. Then I slowly turned my head to the left. Mrs. Gable was in her garden, not 20 feet away. She was deadheading a rose bush with a pair of shears. Snip, snip. She didn't look up. She knew I was there. She could feel the heat radiating off me. I walked over. I didn't care about the property line. I didn't care about the no trespassing sign she had staked in the mulch. "Linda," I said. My voice was dangerously calm. She paused, a rose bloom in her hand. She adjusted her visor and looked at me over the rim of her glasses. "It's Mrs. Gable, Jack, and you're trampling my mulch. That's a violation of Bylaw 4, Section C regarding respect of adjacent landscaping." "You stole my package," I said. "I did no such thing," she sniffed, turning back to the roses. Snip. "I have it on video," I said, stepping closer. "I just watched you walk onto my porch, pick up a box addressed to me, and throw it in your trash bin right before the truck came. That box is gone, crushed." She finally turned to face me fully, crossing her arms over her floral chest. She didn't look guilty. She looked annoyed. "Jack, honestly, it was clutter." I blinked. "Excuse me?" "Clutter," she repeated, enunciating the word like I was a toddler. "It was sitting right there in the entryway. It's unsightly. We have standards in Pine Creek. You can't just leave cardboard debris lying around where people can see it from the street. It brings down the property values." "It was a delivery," I shouted, losing the calm. "It had been there for 3 minutes. Steve, the driver, just dropped it off." "Well, you should have been there to receive it," she countered, her voice taking on that shrill, lecturing tone that made my teeth ache. "If you're going to order things, you need to bring them inside immediately. I did you a favor. I tidied up." "You threw away an $800 carburetor," I roared. Her eyes widened slightly, but she recovered instantly. "Don't be dramatic. It was a little box. Probably just more video games or whatever it is you do in that garage all night." "It was a new old-stock K-Hin carburetor rack for a 1974 Honda CB754, I yelled, knowing the words meant nothing to her, but needing to say them. "I have been searching for that part for 6 months. I won a bidding war in Japan for it. And you fed it to a garbage truck because it didn't match the feng shui of your porch view?" "Stop shouting," she hissed, looking around to see if other neighbors were watching. "You're disturbing the peace. If you don't get off my property this instant, I'm calling the police." "You know what?" I pulled my phone out. "Go ahead. Actually, save your minutes. I'm calling them." I dialed the non-emergency line right there in front of her. She rolled her eyes, turned her back, and went back to her roses. Snip, snip, like I didn't exist, like she hadn't just destroyed a piece of mechanical history. I waited on the curb for 20 minutes. My socks dried out, crusted with dirt. I went inside, put on boots, grabbed the iPad with the footage, and came back out. When the cruiser finally rolled up, I felt a surge of vindication. It was a Dodge Charger, black and white, sleek. The window rolled down. It was Officer Miller. Of course it was. Miller was a good guy, about my age, looked like he hadn't slept in a week. He covered our sector, which meant 90% of his job was dealing with noise complaints about kids playing basketball too loudly or people parking 2 inches too far from the curb. He knew Mrs. Gable. Everyone in uniform knew Mrs. Gable. "Jack," Miller said, stepping out of the car and adjusting his belt. "What's going on? Dispatch said something about a theft?" "Grand larceny, maybe," I said, handing him the iPad. "Watch this." Miller leaned against the hood of his cruiser, the sun glinting off his badge. He watched the video. He watched it twice. He let out a long, heavy sigh that seemed to deflate his entire posture. "Okay," Miller said, handing the iPad back. "She definitely took it, and she definitely tossed it." "She admitted it," I said, pointing at her house. "She told me she did it because it was clutter. That part cost me nearly $1,000, Miller. I want to press charges. Theft, destruction of property, trespassing. Throw the book at her." Miller rubbed the back of his neck. "Let me go talk to her." He walked up the path to Mrs. Gable's door. She must have been watching through the blinds because the door opened before he even knocked. I couldn't hear everything, but I saw the performance. Mrs. Gable shrank 3 inches. She hunched her shoulders. She put a hand to her chest, looking like a frail, confused grandmother who had just been accosted by a hooligan. She pointed at me. She pointed at the porch. She made a gesture like she was just cleaning up. Miller nodded. He took notes. He spoke calmly. She wiped a fake tear from her eye. After 10 minutes, Miller walked back to me. He didn't look like he was reaching for his handcuffs. He looked like a man who wanted a donut and a nap. "Jack, look," Miller started, lowering his voice. "She's claiming she thought it was trash. She says the box was beaten up. It was in mint condition. I know, I saw the video, but she's claiming it was an honest mistake. She thought she was helping clean up the neighborhood. She says you've been harassing her about her gardening and this is retaliation. She's lying." I felt the veins in my neck bulging. "You saw the video. She checked the label. She sneered at it." "I know," Miller said, holding up a hand. "But here's the problem. The package is gone. It's in the landfill by now. We can't recover it to prove what was in it. Without the physical item, I can't verify the value. She claims she thought it was empty rubbish. It becomes a he said, she said about intent." "So she just gets away with it?" I asked, incredulous. "I can walk into her house, grab a vase, throw it in the trash, and say I thought it was clutter?" "No," Miller said sternly. "Don't do that. Look, technically this is a civil matter now. You can take her to small claims court for the value of the item. But criminally? The DA isn't going to touch a 70-year-old lady accidentally throwing away a box with no proof of contents. It's petty theft at best. And with her clean record," he used air quotes, "it's a citation that she'll fight and win. This isn't the first time, Miller. She's a menace. I know, Jack, I know. But my hands are tied. File a civil suit. Get a lawyer. But I can't arrest her for this." He opened his car door. "And Jack, keep your nose clean. She's already talking about filing a harassment complaint against you for yelling at her. Don't give her ammo." Miller drove away. I stood there in the silence of the suburbs. I looked at Mrs. Gable's house. She was back at the window. The blinds twitched. I could feel her smugness radiating through the glass. She had won. She knew the system better than I did. She knew that being an old lady gave her a shield of invincibility. She destroyed something I loved just to exert a tiny amount of control over my life. And the law shrugged. I walked back into my garage. The smell of oil and old rubber greeted me. The skeleton of the 1974 Honda sat on the lift, a beautiful, half-finished beast. It had a hole in its heart where the carburetors should be. I picked up a wrench. I gripped it until my knuckles turned white. Small claims court? No. Small claims court would take 6 months. She'd delay, she'd lie, she'd appeal. Even if I won, I'd just get a check. A check wouldn't fix the disrespect. A check wouldn't teach her that she couldn't just touch other people's lives because she was bored. I didn't want her money. I wanted her to feel what it was like to lose control. I looked at the empty space on the workbench where the package should have been. Then I looked at the security monitor still paused on her face as she dumped my property into the trash. "Okay, Linda," I said to the empty garage. "You like the trash? You like rules? Let's play by the rules." That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at my computer. I wasn't looking for motorcycle parts anymore. I was researching fence contractors. And after that, I was researching glitter. Not just any glitter. I was looking for the industrial stuff, the kind of glitter they use in hell. The war for Pine Creek had just begun, and Mrs. Gable had fired the first shot. But I was going to fire the last one, and it was going to be sparkly. Section 2. The fence, fine, and the contractor. 2 days later, the letter arrived. It wasn't an apology. It was on thick, cream-colored paper with the official Pine Creek Homeowners Association letterhead embossed in gold foil at the top. Dear resident, it has come to the board's attention that unsightly debris, motorcycle parts, scrap metal, is frequently left visible from the street frontage of your property. Furthermore, there have been reports of aggressive behavior toward neighbors attempting to maintain community standards. This serves as a formal warning. Please remove all non-compliant items from your porch immediately. Future infractions will result in a fine of $150 per incident. Sincerely, Linda Gable, HOA President. I held the letter. I actually laughed. It was a dark, dry laugh that startled my dog, Buster. She had destroyed my property, and now she was fining me for the debris that she had destroyed. It was a level of gaslighting that was almost impressive. I walked out to the driveway. My porch was empty. There was nothing there. She was fining me for the memory of the box. I needed a perimeter. If she was going to weaponize the property line, I was going to fortify it. I called Tony. Tony was a legend in 3 counties. He ran Tony's Iron and Gate, and the man was built like a vending machine with a mustache. He showed up in a truck that looked like it had been through a demolition derby and won. "So," Tony said, chewing on a toothpick as he surveyed my front yard. "You want a fence, but not just a fence. You sounded specific on the phone." "I want a barricade, Tony," I said, leaning against his truck. "I want 6 feet of wrought iron, spikes on top, and right here," I pointed to the spot next to the mailbox. "I want a drop box, solid steel, welded to the ground, keypad entry, something that would take a plasma cutter to get into." Tony squinted at the house next door. Mrs. Gable was there, of course. She was sweeping her driveway, inching closer and closer to us, her ears practically growing larger to catch the conversation. "Neighbor trouble?" Tony asked, following my gaze. "She stole a package. Cops couldn't do anything." Tony grunted. "Ah, the civil matter special. I hate that. Had a lady in Oakwood who cut down her neighbor's oak tree because it shaded her cat. People are crazy, Jack. Can you do it?" "I can do it, but it ain't gonna be cheap, and—" He nodded toward Mrs. Gable. "She looks like the type who measures setbacks with a laser pointer." "I pulled the permits this morning," I said, handing him a folder. "Everything is up to code. To the inch." I checked the HOA bylaws. Fences are allowed as long as they are decorative iron and don't exceed 6 feet. Tony grinned, the toothpick shifting to the other side of his mouth. "Decorative iron. I can do decorative. I'll make it look like the gates of Valhalla." We shook hands. Tony's grip was like a vice. Work started on Thursday. The sound of Tony's crew digging post holes was music to my ears. The chunk, chunk, chunk of the auger tearing into the earth felt like progress. I was in the garage, sorting bolts, when I heard the screeching. "Excuse me! Excuse me!" I sighed, wiped my hands on a rag, and walked out. Mrs. Gable was standing at the edge of my lawn, screaming at Tony. Tony was leaning on a shovel, looking at her with the amused expression of a man who deals with angry people for a living. "You cannot dig there!" she shrieked, waving a gloved hand. "That is the easement! You are damaging the root system of my azaleas." "Ma'am," Tony said, his voice deep and gravelly, "I'm 2 feet inside the property line. I measured it myself." "You are vibrating the ground!" she yelled. "My soil is delicate, and that truck is an abomination. It's leaking oil on the public road." "It's marking its territory," Tony deadpanned. I stepped in. "Linda, go back inside." She whipped around to face me. This is spite! You're putting up a prison fence out of spite! The Architectural Review Committee has not approved this." "Actually," I said, pulling the approval form out of my back pocket. I kept it on me at all times now. Bylaw 12, Section A. No prior approval needed for security fencing under 6 feet if materials are standard iron. Read it and weep. She snatched the paper from my hand. Her eyes scanned it, desperate to find a loophole. She crumpled it slightly, realized she couldn't destroy it, and shoved it back at me. "This isn't over," she spat. "That truck is blocking the fire hydrant." "It's 10 feet away, Linda!" I shouted. She grabbed the garden hose she had been using. For a second, I thought she was going to hit me with it. Instead, she turned the nozzle to jet and aimed it at the wheels of Tony's truck. "I'm cleaning the street," she yelled over the spray. "Since you people are so dirty." Water splashed over Tony's boots. Mud splattered onto his jeans. The worksite went silent. Tony's crew, 2 guys named Sal and Mike, stopped digging. They looked at Tony. Tony looked at his wet boots. He looked at Mrs. Gable, who was maniacally spraying the asphalt. Tony smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "All right, Jack," Tony said, turning to me. "I was going to charge you for the rush order, but for her, I'll do the install for parts and labor, no markup." "You're a good man, Tony." "I hate bullies," Tony said, wiping mud off his shin. "Hey, you want the drop box to have a loud buzzer? Like, really annoying when it opens?" "The loudest you got," I said. The fence went up in record time. It was beautiful. Black powder-coated steel, Gothic finials on top, and a drop box that looked like a safe. It was a fortress. But I knew a fence wasn't enough. As I watched Mrs. Gable through the bars of my new gate, pacing back and forth, taking photos of the fence for her file, I realized she wasn't discouraged. She was energized. She viewed the fence as a challenge. She started leaving notes on the gate. "Rust observed on hinge. Remediation required within 24 hours. Gate squeak violates noise ordinance. Black paint absorbs heat and contributes to global warming." I tore them up. But then, on Tuesday, a package went missing. I had ordered a box of shop rags. Cheap stuff. I checked the tracking. Delivered, front porch. But the drop box was empty. I checked the video. There she was, Mrs. Gable. But she wasn't on my porch. She was standing on her side of the fence, standing on a step ladder. She had a grabber tool, one of those long claw things old people use to pick up trash. The delivery driver had left the package on top of the drop box because he didn't have the code yet. Mrs. Gable had simply reached over the fence with her claw, snagged the bag of rags, and dropped it into her garden cart. She looked directly at the camera and smiled. A tight, thin-lipped smile. I sat back in my chair. The fence hadn't stopped her. It had just made her creative. She wasn't doing this for the items. She didn't want shop rags. She was doing it to show me that I couldn't stop her. "Okay," I whispered. "You want to play games? Let's play games." I opened a new browser tab. I wasn't looking for contractors anymore. I was looking for decoys. It was time to escalate. Section 3. The decoy operations. The concept of a bait package is simple. You take a box, you put something undesirable inside, and you leave it out for the thief. But for Mrs. Gable, I couldn't just use dog poop. That was too crude. Mrs. Gable considered herself a sophisticated woman. I needed to embarrass her. I needed to make her question the reality of what she was stealing. I started small. Decoy number 1, the heavyweight. I took an Amazon box and filled it with rocks. Not just gravel, but dense, heavy river stones. I taped it up beautifully. I slapped an old shipping label on it. I placed it on the top of the drop box, right where she could reach it with her grabber tool. I watched the feed, 2:00 p.m. She came out. She saw the box. She got her ladder. She got the claw. She clamped onto the box. But 40 pounds of rock is hard to lift with a plastic grabber tool. I watched as she strained. Her face turned red. The claw slipped. Bang! The box hit the ground on my side. She hissed in frustration. She tried again. She maneuvered the claw, got a grip, and heaved. She managed to get it over the fence, but the weight was too much. As she swung it toward her, the momentum took her. She stumbled back off the ladder, landing in her prized petunias with a squawk. The box landed on her shin. I replayed that clip 4 times, drinking a cold beer. It was therapeutic, but she took the box. She limped inside with it. Decoy number 2, the private collection. 3 days later. I used a box from a company that didn't exist, but I printed a label that said, Adam and Eve Adult Novelties, Super Jumbo Discreet Packaging. I made sure the font was large enough to be read from space. I left it out. She took it. The footage showed her reading the label. She paused. She looked around. She looked scandalized. Then a look of pure, malicious glee crossed her face. She snatched it. I knew exactly what she would do. She wouldn't open it. She would keep it as evidence. She would bring it to the next HOA meeting to prove I was running a house of ill repute or something equally insane. Joke was on her. Inside was just a glittery card that said, Jesus is watching you steal, Linda. Day 10. The police. Round 2. I had a compilation video now. 5 thefts in 10 days. Rags, rocks, the novelty box, and a bag of cat litter. I walked into the station. I asked for Miller. Miller looked even more tired than before. He had a coffee stain on his shirt. Jack, he said, rubbing his eyes, tell me you're not here about the neighbor again. She's stealing over the fence now, Miller. Look. I played the montage on my phone. Miller watched Mrs. Gable fall off the ladder with the rock box. The corner of his mouth twitched. He almost smiled. Almost. Okay, Miller said. That's creative. But Jack, are you baiting her? I'm putting packages on my property, I said defensively. If she steals them, that's on her. Is it illegal to leave a box of rocks on my own fence? No, Miller sighed. But it shows a pattern of escalation. Look, I can go talk to her again. I can write a report. But the DA is slow, I know. It's not just that. She's filing complaints, too. She says you're filming her. She says you're taunting her with obscene materials. She stole the obscene materials. Jack, listen to me. Miller leaned in. You're winning the battle, maybe. but you're losing the war. You're engaging. As long as you engage, she has power. She feeds on this. Just lock your stuff up. Don't leave things on top of the box. She's a thief, Miller. I know. But until she steals something of significant value that we can prove, or until she hurts someone, she's just a nuisance. I walked out of the station. Miller was right about one thing. She was feeding on it. She liked the game. She liked the attention. I drove home. When I pulled up, I saw it. She had installed a trellis. A massive wooden lattice structure rose up on her side of the fence, completely blocking the view of my drop box from my security camera. I checked the feed. A gray wall of wood. I walked out to the fence. "Linda!" She popped her head around the trellis. She was smiling. "Privacy screen, Jack. Approved by the ARC this morning. I felt like I was being watched. A woman needs her privacy." "You're blocking my security camera." "Oh dear. Maybe you should move your camera. Or better yet, stop spying on me." I looked at the trellis. It blocked the camera, but it didn't block her access. There was a gap at the bottom. She could still reach through and grab things if she wanted to. She had blinded me. I went inside. I sat at my workbench. I looked at the wall where I kept my schematics. Bait packages were child's play. Rocks were crude. Fake labels were funny. But they didn't stop her. I needed something that would end this. I needed a deterrent. I needed a weapon of mass distraction. I remembered a video I'd seen online years ago. An engineer who built glitter bombs for porch pirates. But those were complicated. They used 4G radios and GPS. I didn't need that. I knew exactly where the target was. The target was 20 feet away. But Mrs. Gable was smart now. She wouldn't open a random Amazon box. She was suspicious of brown cardboard. I needed something she couldn't resist. Something that spoke to her soul. What did Linda Gable love more than anything in the world? Rules, authority, getting people in trouble. If she thought I was in trouble, if she thought she had legal leverage over me, she wouldn't be able to help herself. I grabbed a notepad. I sketched a rectangle. The subpoena. It had to be flat. It had to look official. It had to look like the kind of document that ruins a person's life. And inside? I looked at the shelf above my lathe, a jar of fine craft glitter, neon pink. The stuff that acts like a virus. If you touch it, you have it forever. And next to it, a bottle I had bought as a gag gift for a buddy but never gave him. Liquid ass. A concentrated spray that smelled like a dead skunk ate a diaper. I picked up the bottle. Nuclear option, I muttered. I started drawing. The mechanism had to be thin. A centrifugal spinner powered by a high-torque 9V motor. A spring-loaded trigger switch connected to the envelope flap. When the flap opens, the circuit closes. The motor spins. The glitter flies. And 3 seconds later, the servo depresses the nozzle on the spray. I wasn't just building a prank. I was engineering a masterpiece. Section 4. Engineering the payload. The next 3 nights were a blur of soldering irons, 3D printing, and manic laughter. The challenge was the thickness. A standard envelope is flat. If I made it too bulky, she'd know it was a trap. It had to be a document mailer, those stiff cardboard envelopes used for photos or legal papers. That gave me about ½ an inch of clearance. I used a flat 3D printed chassis. The motor, I cannibalized a high RPM drone motor. Small, flat, violent. I designed a custom cup to hold the glitter. It wasn't just a cup. It was a scatter plate. When that motor hit 10,000 RPM, the centrifugal force would atomize the glitter into a cloud about 6 feet in diameter. The glitter. I didn't just use the pink stuff. I made a cocktail. 50% neon pink for visibility. 25% black for contrast, nightmare to clean out of carpets. 25% holographic microdust. This was the evil part. It was so fine it would settle into the pores of the skin. The smell. This was the tricky part. I decanted the liquid ass into a flat perfume sampler atomizer. I wired a small timing chip. T-0. Flap opens. T-1. Motor spins. Glitter explosion. T-4. Servo arm pushes the atomizer. Psst, psst, psst. Why the delay? Because I wanted her to gasp first. I wanted her mouth open in shock when the smell hit. The disguise. This was where the art came in. I went to a print shop. I bought high-quality, linen-textured cardstock. I designed a logo. Dewey, Cheatham & Howe Associates, Attorneys at Law, 1-800-BAD NEWS. I typed up the label, urgent, personal, and confidential, to Mr. Jack R. Morrison. Warning, tampering with legal mail is a federal offense. Subpoena enclosed. Do not bend. I added a bright orange sticker. Final notice. It was beautiful. It looked terrifying. If I saw that on my porch, I'd have a heart attack. Mrs. Gable wouldn't be able to resist. It was the holy grail of snooping. It implied I was being sued, or divorced, or investigated. She would want to know the details before she reported it to the HOA. She would want to read the charges so she could gossip to the other neighbors. Did you hear? Jack is being subpoenaed for embezzlement? I could hear her voice already. I assembled the device on my kitchen table. I wore surgical gloves. I loaded the glitter. I loaded the scent. I armed the trigger mechanism, a thin plastic tab that would slide out when the envelope was ripped open. I sealed it. It felt heavy, ominous. It rattled slightly if you shook it, but I taped the internal chassis down with foam tape so it felt like a thick stack of legal briefs. I tested the dummy unit one last time in the garage. I pulled the tab. Whir, poof! A cloud of pink dust coated the entire workbench. The smell made me gag and run out of the room. It was ready. Now I just needed a delivery man. I couldn't put it there myself. She'd see me. It had to be delivered. I called Mike. Mike was one of the guys on Tony's fence crew. He owed me a favor because I'd fixed his chainsaw for free. Mike, I said, do you own a tie? I own a clip-on, Mike said. Good enough? I need you to be a process server. A what? A legal courier. I need you to drive up, look confused, look at my house, look at her house, and then leave a very important-looking envelope on my porch, but, and this is key, leave it where she can see it. You want me to bait the Karen? Mike asked, sounding delighted. I want you to deliver justice, Mike. I'm in. The stage was set. The camera was repositioned to look through a gap in the fence slats. The trellis blocked the main view, but I had a side angle now. I sat in my living room, blinds drawn, sipping coffee. Come on, Linda, I whispered. Come get your mail.